Welcome to the Not Old Better Show on radio and podcast. The show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not just older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Thank you and welcome to the Not Old Better Show books and more interview series on radio and podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Aura Frames. Aura Frames, the gift that brings your favorite holiday traditions and memories to life every day. We're talking about a technology that literally just jumped from the lab into your living room, and it seems like everywhere else. Artificial intelligence. It isn't just science fiction. It's the new electricity, quiet everywhere, and suddenly powering the tools we touch every day. Picture this. You hand a dusty shoebox of family letters to an app. In minutes, it can transcribe them, search them, even help you stitch a chapter of your family genealogy and story together. Magic, right? Now flip the coin. Your phone rings, and it sounds exactly like your grandson asking for help, except it isn't. Same technology. Magic and mischief in one breath. So let's demystify the thing itself. AI doesn't think. It recognizes patterns in mountains of information and predicts what comes next, like autocomplete on rocket fuel. Give it clear instructions and good guardrails, and it can summarize a medical handout, transcribe, translate, even handle a prescription label, or prep questions for your next doctor visit. Use it carelessly, and it can be confidently wrong or dangerously persuasive. For those of us in our Encore chapters, here's the deal. AI can be a sidekick. Maybe that's a good way of thinking about it. It can be used for caregiving, lifelong learning, small business activity, creativity. It can also be a risk amplifier for privacy, fraud, and attention. The difference comes down to habits. What we share, what we verify, and what we decide to do ourselves. Our guest understands both sides of that coin. Technologist, author David Eliot joins us with his new book, Artificially Intelligent, a very human story of AI. He studies not just the code, but the consequences, the way these systems shape work, health, and how we relate to each other. So, how does AI really work? Plain English. That's what we're going to hear today from David Eliot. What should families do this week, with all the holidays happening, to scam-proof their phones? Where does AI truly help in daily life? And where's the hype? And what simple 15-minute experiment can you try to get smarter, safer, and more creative with these tools? This is the Not Old Better Show books and more interview series. David Eliot, I'm glad you're here. Welcome.
Perfect. And first off, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm so excited to be talking with you and getting to speak to your amazing audience too, because I think you're right. This really is a topic that touches all of us. And I think one of the reasons it's so important to talk about is because of all this misconception about what is AI, what isn't AI. It can be so difficult. And to anybody struggling with that out there, I tell you, so are we. So are the experts. We often do not know what is or isn't AI. I just spent about 3 months of my life going through all the major legislative definitions of AI. And they all come with like 500-page documents being like, well, here's all the mistakes we made. And, this is why it's so hard. Which points to one of the major issues while talking about this, of that it's not like a regular technology. It's not like a toaster where you can just point and say, well, that's a toaster. It's something that toasts bread. It's not that simple. AI has a very weird quality to it. And it comes from this idea of that it's not an individual technology, but in many ways, it's a goal. It is the idea of machines that act in intelligent ways. And the difficulty of that is that we all kind of define intelligence differently. it's a very weird concept when you think about it. You can define intelligence based on, as a human acts, but human intelligence is so different than other types of intelligence. But right now, when we talk about AI, we tend to be talking about a very specific thing. Because it's important to remember AI is not new. My mother worked on AI in the 80s. But there's something happening right now which is different. That thing that we all seem to be talking about that's blowing up the world or well, not really blowing it up, or hopefully it never will, but that's a different Terminator story there.
That's a
But
good
But with
Terminator.
this, though, what we're talking about is this thing we call deep learning. And deep learning is this technology that popped up in about 2012 in a real fashion. It existed before, but really becoming big. And it's basically a computer algorithm that we don't train or we don't really code ourselves. We give it a framework and then we give it a lot of data and we let it make itself. We let it learn from the data and kind of construct itself. And this technique has been incredibly powerful and has created these systems that we don't always feel in control of and can act in interesting ways, but can also do absolutely phenomenal things. And those are the systems that we tend to refer to as AI. Those are the systems that are driven by this technology we call deep learning.
Fascinating. Thank you for that. Interesting to hear your review of the legislation too. I wonder about that. Maybe just take us through a little bit of that. How much of it focuses on this very human story that you write about? Of course, artificially intelligent, the very human story of AI. Is the legislation taking into account the human side of all of this, or is it just purely, just very cut and dry and all about the technology?
Yeah, it kind of goes both ways here. And I think, we can talk about the legislation we have and the legislation we need in two senses. And one is dealing with the technology. And some of that is very unhuman centric. There's lots of bills about, how big models should be allowed to be and all that. Sometimes you do have more human ones, like in the European Union, where they're looking at values that they as Europeans feel they have and saying that we want to restrain AI so it has to work within these values. There are certain things that we don't think are within our social values, and that's a very human way to regulate something. But then on the other side, we're seeing other bills come into place that aren't necessarily AI legislation. They don't say AI in the title. But when you talk to people, they're coming in for that reason. And those seem to be more human. And those are dealing with, we know AI is going to cause this effect. Therefore, we should get ahead of it and do this stuff. So that stuff like, funding trade schools, funding certain types of education, funding unemployment insurance, also just funding things to do with privacy. Privacy is a real big issue with this as we build up the data infrastructure, which is surveillance infrastructure. It's easy to forget that the production of data only happens when you have surveillance. You need surveillance to do that. That creates privacy problems. Those are very human problems. So as we see privacy laws get passed more, that is in reaction to AI.
Interesting to hear about kind of the human side of this, particularly in the legislation. I really like what you say about creating, having some funding for trade schools, because I think many in my audience will have a pretty good idea of what a trade school really represents. What's at stake if we don't get this right, this idea of focusing on the very human part of the story?
Yeah, I think there's a lot at stake. And I think in a lot of ways, some people in power right now, especially those in the big tech companies, want us to focus on the tech because the tech can be scary. And then we kind of cede over these things. But they will also want us to see this as something big and new. But the reality is a lot of these problems that it's creating are old problems. They're problems we've already been dealing with. They're just amplified. So stuff like, the trade school example is a problem of de-skilling.
Mm-hmm.
Although for people in the white collar jobs that are being de-skilled right now by AI, it might be a new phenomenon. You just have to go to the American Rust Belt to see what happens when you de-skill. You just need to go there to see what happens, that it's not just an economic factor of, oh, someone loses their job. You go to these communities, you see the ripple effects. You see the fact that economic insecurity does not just affect the person who's laid off. It has long lasting effects on their children, on their families. So making sure like that is taken care of. And the jobs crisis is only, one piece of these questions that we need to answer. And the thing I'm really scared of is that when I got into AI, we knew all these things were coming. We just thought we had more time. We thought we had more time to raise that these were issues. Like we were having these conversations before ChatGPT came out.
Mm-hmm.
And then that happened and created just this accelerator. And now we're moving so fast that I worry about this. I worry that we're not going to be able to get the social changes or the social systems in place in time to deal with some of these, major changes that we're going through. So I think, yeah, the human side of it is massive because I also think when we talk about AI, we tend to talk about the negative amplifications. So I like to frame AI as an amplifier. It's a great amplifier. Take, for example, students using it to cheat on exams or cheat on writing papers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I went to undergrad, all the rich kids did that anyway. Just instead of ChatGPT, they paid the the kids who weren't as well off to write the papers for them. But now it's amplified. Now everybody can cheat. But that's the amplification of the bad. The amplification of the good exists too.
Mm-hmm.
All the good in humans, all the good we're doing from cancer research, from global aid distribution, from just our ideas about work in general or innovation is amplified by AI. The fact that anybody now can code much easier unlocks so much human innovation.
Mm-hmm.
So my fear of like when we ask like what's the risk of getting this wrong, it's letting the negative overtake the good. Because that's when we get scared of the technology. That's when we start pulling back. That's when things become bad. And that's when, people in many cases can become radicalized. So we need to promote a version of this technology or an application of it that allows us to embrace and lift up the good while pushing down the bad.
Your book really warns us about how AI might reshape our lives, and I want to drill down a little bit and think from the perspective of our audience about those of us who are retirees, perhaps, or caregivers, grandparents, those of us who might still be really learning about this. What will be some of the most immediate changes that we should be aware of? Is it imminent that we're going to see great leaps and bounds with regard to healthcare, or is that a way off still? What are we going to see immediately?
Yeah, I think immediately we're already starting to see some small changes. I think the first major change we're really going to see is a change in how we interact with computers. Because right now, what we're seeing is kind of this ripple effect of AI products. But at the end of the day, AI is an infrastructure. So we're seeing these products that you might decide you don't want to use or you can use, but slowly it's going to become more infrastructure based. So one of the big things with that, whenever we see these changes, is we tend to see a change in how we interact with computing systems. So whether that be the original shift was mainframe computers to desktop computers and desktop to cellular, now we're seeing this another shift from AI, but we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. Most of Silicon Valley thinks that's going to take the form of smart glasses. And we're already seeing that be integrated more and more. We see Meta has their Ray-Ban smart glasses, which are everywhere right now. My dad actually sent me a video trying them on this week at a store. And then Apple's got their smart glasses. Amazon now has all their employees wearing smart glasses. So that's a big change that we could see immediately in the next 5 years. Healthcare will see massive changes, and it already is. I went and visited a virtual healthcare hub in Saskatoon, Canada, on Dakota First Nation, which is revolutionizing healthcare. Mainly, they're revolutionizing it for rural populations so that they don't need to travel into these hospitals for procedures they typically would have to travel for. And seeing what they're doing there was just phenomenal. And they were not a research center in a university thinking, oh, this is, 50 years out. They were implementing this stuff now, and everything they were doing was coming in more and more, which is just phenomenal. And as I talk about the amplification effects, one of the biggest things we're going to see is the stuff you won't see, because you won't notice that it's not a human reading your scan anymore. A human might give it a check over, but you might not notice that. what you might notice is that humans seem to be developing more radiology technology. Well, that comes from the fact that those radiologists aren't spending their whole day reading scans anymore and are getting to spend their day doing this work. So I think AI will be at its best actually when we don't see it. AI will be at its best when all we notice is these small improvements in our lives. And I'll just give one quick example of that. I use it in the book, but it's my personal philosophy of computing and AI is that it's at its best when it disappears into the background. Tech companies usually have a invested interest in making it forward looking and look very futuristic, but when it disappears, I think it's at its best. And the example I give is in Barcelona. They use their tech in the city, which is one of the smartest cities in the world, not to do some fancy computer work, but to decide where to plant trees. And they have massively improved the quality of life using all the AI tech they have there on deciding where to plant trees, which brings down the temperature, does amazing climate control, and makes the city 100 times more livable. So those are ways I see it really changing our lives that we won't necessarily see, but will have massive impacts.
That's really helpful and fascinating to hear that because I never would have thought growing trees might be a byproduct of artificial intelligence, and I think that's really interesting. I think so many in our audience think about the negative side of AI taking away jobs, and you talked a little bit about caregivers, retirees, and those of us who are past 60 and what that might mean for us. What is it going to mean in terms of jobs for our grandkids and our kids? Reforestation, trade school. What do you see out there as those some of those opportunities?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. And it's one that's really sat with me because I just got off doing a physical tour and I was visiting high schools and universities.
Mm.
And everywhere I went, you got this question. And it's a difficult one to have to answer because the truth behind it is anybody who tells you they know what's going to happen is either lying to you or trying to sell you something.
Mm.
We are in uncharted territory. AI has massive automating potential. How that's going to take hold in the next couple of years is anybody's bet. I am skeptical of the things we're seeing right now. We hear a lot right now about, you know, AI is pushing people out of the workforce. Again, I'm skeptical. I think AI could in the future, but the systems I have seen are not ready to fully automate a human yet. And in that sense, when you look at the companies that are doing it, most of them have two things in common. They're heavily invested in AI and developing AI, and they overhired during the pandemic. So for companies like Meta and Amazon who overhired, it's actually a lot better for them to go to their investors and instead of saying, listen, we overhired, we've got to lay off 10,000 people, they get to say, hey, you know that cool AI thing we've been developing? Well, because of that, we get the opportunity to lay off 10,000 people. And then they put that in the media and their stock goes crazy because everyone's like, look at them being so efficient. We're not actually sure if that's efficiency or if that's a different, a different force from the market. But in what I tell to young people now is that the most valuable skills you have are the skills that make you human. I think critical thinking skills are incredibly valuable. If you want to go to university, and I always promote to everybody, don't see university as a way to get a job. I come from the university. I love the idea of a university and I love my degrees and my experience.
Stay with us after the break. David Eliot pulls back the curtain on what AI really means for our jobs, our families, and the choices we make this very week. You won't want to miss the one practical step, he says, every listener can take today to turn this tech from a mystery into a tool. Thanks for listening. Stay curious, stay cautious, and stay tuned because the next chapter is already being written. You're part of it. What if you could give a gift that brings your favorite holiday traditions to life every single day? For me, It's our family's pajamas and pancakes tradition on Christmas morning. Started by my mom over 50 years ago, we still gather, matching flannel and all, and take the same photo around the same kitchen table year after year. I've got pictures of my kids sitting in the same chair I once did. These moments, they're golden. And now, thanks to Aura Frames, they're right in front of me every day. Speaking of my mom, who's 95, by the way, we use our Aura frame to send photos and memories of our new grandson. Our grandson is 1, my mom, 95, and they live across the country from one another, but now they're closer than ever with these great memories. She's a great grandma. She loves these pictures of her great grandson. Aura isn't just a digital frame. It's a portal to the people, places, and traditions that matter most. With unlimited free photo and video storage, you can add memories from decades ago or ones you just took yesterday. The app makes it effortless. Whether you're tech savvy or tech cautious, it's just a few taps and suddenly your memories are lighting up your home again. Here's the best part. You can preload the frame before it even arrives. This is an amazing benefit. Add a message, upload your favorite shots, and give a gift that feels as thoughtful as it is beautiful. The frame comes in a premium gift box, no price tag, no wrapping needed. This year, I'm starting a new tradition. I'm giving Aura frames. One for my sisters, filled with family photos. One for my sons, with pictures of their first memories, especially from all of their school activities. This is great. Because you can't wrap togetherness, but you can frame it. Relive your favorite holiday traditions every day. For a limited time, visit auraframes.com and get $45 off Aura's best-selling Carver mat frames named #1 by Wirecutter by using promo code NOB at checkout. That's Aura, AURA, frames.com, promo code NOB. All of this will be in our show notes today. This exclusive Black Friday, Cyber Monday deal is their best of the year, so order now before it ends. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Technology author David Eliot is our guest today. David Eliot is author of the new book, Artificially Intelligent, the very human story of AI. It's a wonderful book, and it's such a pleasure to be speaking with you today, David Eliot. We're grateful for your time. Let's talk a little bit about what we might, especially in my age group, be skeptical of in terms of relationships, because in my age group, isolation, loneliness, those are big concerns. AI really might stem that tide in terms of our own concerns or fears about being alone. Should we be hopeful about some of the relationship aspects of that AI can bring?
I'm cautious on it. I think there's great opportunities here. I think we need to be very careful. I will start again with the good on this. One of the first systems I saw that I loved from AI were these little seals. They're seal pups. And to the people listening at home, I suggest you look this up. Japanese old age home AI seal pups. They are adorable. The cutest thing you've ever seen.
Got it.
And they would be in these old age homes and they would act as companions for elderly people. And
Seal
they
pups.
could emote.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're adorable. But what I loved about them, or I didn't realize this is one of the reasons I loved them then. Now, because of my experiences, I'm like, this is why, is they are very unhuman. You see them, you know they're not human. They're not trying to fill that void of human interaction. You know what they are. It's like a dog or a cat. It's very clear, the relationship you have with this thing. The problem with the systems we have now is they have blurred that line. They have blurred the line of what is human and what isn't. And the tech community is very aware that they have messed up. The CEO of Microsoft AI put out a really great blog post about this a couple weeks ago. And then they changed some of their operating systems. Because the issue is when these things present themselves as being too human, and have these conversations with us like they are human, it can have very negative effects on the person receiving that information. It can have very negative effects on our psyche. We have a lot of cases now of what we call AI psychosis, where the AI will actually put the person into a mental episode and into a psychosis, and it can get quite dangerous to the point where some of these AI companies are being sued right now and implicated in suicides, where the AIs have convinced the person to take their own life or been helpful in them taking their own life, which is a really scary outcome that we're seeing here. We're seeing people fall madly in love with their AI systems. And part of it is because when you know how these systems work, they are just meant to please you. They're just meant to put the next words together to answer your prompt in a way that will please you.
Mm-hmm.
One of the beautiful things about human connection is the differences between us.
Mm-hmm.
It's the reason why everybody likes their AI assistant is that it's made just to please someone like them.
Mm-hmm.
It never has any of that pushback. It never has any of that other side. So although it can help with the loneliness, it also can feel much more empty. And that's one of the things we tend to hear on this. I will say I'm not the expert on this topic, but I cannot suggest enough. My friend Victoria Hetherington has a book called The Friend Machine, which just came out, I think, the week before my book. And it's completely on this topic, interviews people who have fallen in love with their AIs, interviews psychologists. Honestly, I'm only about halfway through it right now, so I need to get to the end before I can give my full thoughts. But overall, it's a really interesting take on these issues because, as you say, it is a real problem. And I think this can help in some areas. But again, we need good guardrails and we need to make sure that we implement it in the best possible ways, especially now that we've seen the damage that can be done with it.
I'm going to go find those links to the Japanese seal pups in old age homes. Is that what you said? Yeah, good.
I'll find some videos of them and email it to you after.
Okay, that would be great. That would be great. We will also put links to David's work and David Eliot's new book, Artificially Intelligent, and all of the other great stuff that David has been talking to us about. David, I want to get back to this idea of the power of the big tech companies and how they are shaping the rules around AI. What is it that some of us who aren't part of these big companies, just individuals, what can we do in our communities? There's a great deal of discussion going on in many of the local communities around where I live about the use of energy and power to literally run these artificial intelligent companies. But what is it that we can do just at our local level to protect our communities? What are you suggesting?
Yeah, so I come at this from a couple different perspectives, and I feel like it's a very complicated issue to address. Mm-hmm. I think the number one thing that we can do right now, the first step, is educating ourselves on AI, is not educating ourselves on how to use it. And I think there's a difference there. We tend to hear about this thing called AI literacy, which tends to mean, how do you use ChatGPT? How do you integrate it in your lives? Mm-hmm. I don't think that's how we need to be learning about it. I think we need to start with an understanding of what is AI. How does it work? What are the basic functionings of it? Which is why I wrote this book. You don't need to use my book for this. If you are a visual learner, Crash Course on YouTube has an amazing AI series. I cannot recommend them enough. I like my book because it also discusses the social aspects of how it engages with society. But I think that the everyday person learning these fundamentals, it helps pull back the curtain. And I like to give the example of, before I worked in AI, I was actually a professional magician. That was my job for a long time. And in magic, we like to keep the secret hidden because it gives us power over you. But the dirty secret is that most magic tricks, especially card tricks, there's only 5 real moves you need to know. We spend lifetimes perfecting those moves and finding new ways to combine them. And even if you know how they work, it's like guitar. You could know all the chords and see it, but not be able to play like Jimi Hendrix. But once you know how it works, it takes the mystery away from it. It takes the power away from it. With magic, that should stay a mystery. With AI, though, it shouldn't. And with AI, it's the same. There's only a handful of things you actually need to know to really be able to join these conversations. But before you know them, it's very difficult for your local government, for different groups, for NGOs to take you seriously in these conversations because you don't necessarily know what you're arguing against or what you're arguing for. We need language. We need understanding to hold truth to power. But I always say no one knows how AI is going to affect your community better than you do. No one knows how it's going to affect your job, how it's going to affect your area, your region better than you. Gaining that language and that knowledge gives you the ability to see that in your life. And I really believe in this like bottom up approach. And I think that's what we need to focus on now because a bottom up approach takes time. But starting from that bottom of the language, starting to, speak at our school boards, speak in our local community halls, our trade groups, our union groups, that's where we start to build it from the bottom up. And if we don't get that done in time, if we need to make these changes and we need to make them fast, they're going to have to come from the top down. And top down changes are never good for small communities because they never understand what those communities are going through and they can't. It's just the functioning of governments. It's difficult to understand these community groups. So I think the biggest thing we can do is in our communities, focus on educating ourselves and focusing on finding places to advocate. And I also think people on the other two sides of it, people like me, need to do a better job at pulling back that curtain, continuing to communicate, continuing to provide avenues for the everyday person to learn. And then I think our governance systems need to at the same time provide more avenues for everyday people to join the conversation. Because right now it's dominated by tech, it's dominated by industry. But AI is something that touches all of us. It is going to touch every industry and every community. So everybody should have a voice in this conversation.
Well, congratulations on this book, Artificially Intelligent. David Eliot's our guest today. All the research, such great information. In particular, the historical chapters that you write. I wonder if you just, for a moment, share one perhaps little known story from AI's past that might help us better understand where we're going, where we're headed now.
One little known story. There's so many great ones in here.
Yeah.
I think I really fell in love with this story of actually how the computer was invented and the first moment, because it comes from this character named Charles Babbage. And Charles Babbage was a madman in that he was the most brilliant mathematician of his day. And this is the mid 1800s. And he also had I'll tell the story of how he invented the computer first, actually. So because he was a mathematician back then, mathematicians constantly used computers, but they didn't use what we thought of as being computers. Computers back then were people. They were people who did calculations for mathematicians because they didn't have a calculator. They couldn't just pick up their phone and type in the numbers they had put down. So the computer would do that. And Babbage must have been insufferable because he was so brilliant that he would write these huge things out and just get so upset with these other humans who weren't as good as him at math, messing up his equations. And I love the story of him sitting in the bar one day, just lost in a trance, looking at his book. And his friends they couldn't figure out what was going on. They're like, Babbage, you've been staring at that book for hours. What are you doing? And he looked up and said, I think all of these numbers could be calculated by a machine. And that was the moment computing started, the moment this man realized that. But what I think is really brilliant about this, or beautiful, is that he didn't realize what he had invented. When he actually invented the computer, he thought he had invented what we would call today to be a calculator. However, there was a young woman named Ada Lovelace who was this brilliant mathematician counted out by most of the world because she was a woman in the 1800s. But Babbage really respected her. And Babbage let her see the plans for his machine. And she was the first one to recognize that what he had built was not a computer, or was not a calculator, but was a computer, and the potential that it would have on changing the world if he ever got to build it. Her writings inspired Alan Turing. They are still thought of today as some of the most important writings in computing. So what I like to leave us with that is that we tend to think about the people who have the ability to change things as being the people at the top, of being the Babbages, of being these, elites in these institutions. He was at Cambridge, of being the politicians. But really, our future was set by the writings of this young woman who was not allowed to engage in these institutions, but through the power of her vision and mind, set a course that put us on this path. In Alan Turing's famous paper where he proposes artificial intelligence, he's arguing with Ada Lovelace. He's arguing with Lady Lovelace. So I really think it's important to recognize in that story the power that every individual can have in this conversation, and the way that the decisions that we make back then, she had no way of knowing the massive change, the ripple effect she was going to cause in the narrative history of not just AI, but of humanity. So I liked the human framing, the historical framing, because I think it also helps us learn not only how AI works, but how our decisions work and how we are still in control of this story. And much like Lady Lovelace, when she made the decisions to write down her thoughts on Babbage's machine and publish them, we get to make decisions now on how we want to deal with this technology, and the decisions that we all make today will have those effects for the future.
David Eliot, I knew this was going to be a really enjoyable conversation about your new book, Artificially Intelligent, the very human side and story of AI, the very human story of AI. David Eliot's been our guest. I would, just selfishly, I would love to have you back and talk to us as you do more work on this subject. I also would love to see some of your magic acts. So we'll have you back and maybe do a combination of things. But David Eliot, thank you so much for your time, for being so generous. This is a wonderful subject, so timely, and you've done such a great job. Congratulations again on this wonderful book.
Thank you so much again, Paul, for having me on. It really has been quite the pleasure.
Thanks, David. That's a wrap on today's deep dive, but certainly not the end of the story. Remember, today's show is brought to you by Aura Frames. Aura Frames, the gift that brings your favorite holiday traditions and memories to life every day. We've peeled back the curtain on a technology that's already whispering into our phones, our homes, and our family conversations, and will only grow louder. The real power isn't in the machine. It's in what we decide to do with it. So, take today's talk as a challenge, not a warning. Ask, what small step will I take tomorrow to use AI wisely, safely, and creatively? Because the future isn't something that happens to us. It's something we shape, one smart choice at a time. If you want to keep going, there's a guide worth opening. You can check out all of this information in our show notes today. Please remember, be well, be safe. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show on radio and podcast. This has been our Books and More interview series. We'll see you next time.